Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 253, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, May 10th, 2024. A good Friday to all of you. I hope you're doing well and got through the storms on Thursday okay. I am recording this during the storm. It just started. There's a little bit of thunder happening, so you may possibly pick that up as you're listening, and some lightning strikes around the area as well. Hopefully, like I said, it doesn't get too much worse than this. I know there's some, you get your warnings, tornado warnings, or severe storm warnings, things like that. Hopefully it turns out to be okay. No damage, no big issues. So I hope you all got through it okay, yourselves, your property, whatever else. And hopefully I can get through this podcast without losing power or something. But other than that, like I said, I hope things are going well for you. I know storms may continue into the weekend. There's varying reports. But regardless, you can go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. See what's going on around town, find something to do, whether indoors or outdoors. But yeah, if weather's bad, particularly as you're listening to this on Friday, because I think there's a chance some of those storms will continue, be sure to just double check with any events that maybe say outdoors. Make sure they're still having those events, because even if the storm stops, as in there's no more rain or anything, a lot of times events, as I'm sure many of you know, get canceled or postponed because storms the day before have left the ground all muddy or puddly, or there's still flooding in certain areas. So always double check those things. I try to keep the calendar up to date, but sometimes people don't reach out to let me know their events canceled, or they don't make a big public announcement, but I try to keep that as up to date as possible. So like I said, anytime we have a situation like this, just double check. But any indoor events should be okay, and get out there and enjoy your weekend. Been a good week for me, lots of work as usual. And then on Wednesday, I went out to Firefly, as I had been talking about, the distillery out in North Charleston. They had a concert with Queens of the Stone Age and Royal Blood. Had a really good time. Weather was good at that time. A little muggy, a little hot, a little sweaty at the start of the evening. But as the sun went down, it was quite nice, except for all the little gnats that all of a sudden decided to come out. For those who haven't been to Firefly, when they have these shows, it's just in a grassy area. It's just a stage and then a bunch of grass that people hang out on. And, they have vendors and places to get food and drinks and all that. And it's kind of, there's a tree line to the left of the stage. And when that sun went down, man, those gnats came out. And of course, with it being warm weather, I had shorts and a t-shirt on, like many people there. And I spent a significant chunk of the evening swatting at my legs and arms as these little gnats, or whatever the heck they were, started landing on me and biting. And I wasn't the only one. I saw a lot of people adding that little to their dance routines, enjoying the music and slapping at their arms and legs. But other than that, it was a good show. I left a little early. I was more there to see Royal Blood, a band I've been wanting to see for a while, and they were great. I mean, Queens of the Stone Age did a really good job too. I'm just not as big of a fan of theirs, and I am certainly not a fan of traffic and craziness. So I ducked out a little early, but still saw a significant portion of their set, which was, like I said, was entertaining. It sounded good. They were great, and headed home and had a good night. And like I said, it's always nice to beat that traffic. Should be a quiet weekend for me. Friday, when you're listening to this, I'm planning on going to the music hall to see Sierra Farrell. Very excited about that, and I'll be sure to recap on Monday's episode, or whenever I have an episode to talk about such things, because I think Monday's episode may end up being an interview, so be on the lookout for that. Regardless of what type of episode it is, just subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, and you'll be able to make sure you catch that episode and all future ones. So with that, enough about me and what's going on here. Let's get into the local news. First up, as expected, this proposed bill that's essentially just anti-transgender people has been passed by the Senate after it was passed by the House. This was all expected. It's now going to head to Governor McMaster's desk. By the time you hear this, he may have already signed it into law. He's expected to do so. This is the bill that we've talked about on past episodes about blocking anyone under the age of 18 from having any sort of gender affirming care, which is, as we've discussed, dangerous, is unnecessary. And although there may be certain types of things that people of certain ages may not be ready for, to block any care from anyone is just kind of unthinkable. But that's where we're headed. In addition to that, I haven't seen the Senate's version that they passed, but I would imagine there wasn't any significant changes. Otherwise, it would have gone back to the House. That means there's probably that provision in there where even people over the age of 18, if they have like Medicaid or Medicare, they wouldn't be able to get those types of healthcare services either, which, again, as we've talked about in the past, gives away the game. This was never about quote unquote protecting children when you're looping in adults with it. So just shameful legislation, completely expected from our legislature. No surprise here that it went through despite objections, not just from the community, but from professionals, doctors, actual trans people, actual parents of trans people. Just shameful that this went through, especially especially with how far it goes is what makes it even worse. So yes, that is in effect. We don't need to rehash my thoughts on it. I've done that plenty of times. So number one, I'll say I'm sorry to anyone that this affects, especially trans children that were getting whatever care that was deemed necessary for them that they no longer can get in this state. Or this is all assuming Henry McMaster signs the legislation, which he's expected to. So if he ends up shocking everything, then great. But it looks like it's going that way. So, I apologize to any parents out there who have trans kids. And of course, any trans adults that are affected by this, whether because they will no longer get the care based on the health insurance and coverage they have, or just, I'm sure seeing your community be demonized, you as a human being dehumanized. I'm sure that's not easy to see, even if you are still able to get your care. I'm sure that part hurts, and also being able to see people who I'm sure you can see yourself in, oh, when I was that age, this is what I was feeling and going through. And I'm thankful I had this, or I wish I had this type of care or whatever. I'm sure that's difficult as well. So that's number one, that I'm sorry for anyone that's being affected by this. Number two, it's, a consolation. I don't know if that's the appropriate word, a small consolation. I wish I had some great thing to share, but there are some resources in the show links, for anyone who needs some help, needs some guidance. Now that this legislation appears to be coming a reality, it will go into effect immediately when the governor signs it. So if you go to the link in the show notes, you'll see some links to resources and things like that. That, again, I know it doesn't fix the law, but may have some important information, useful information for you as well. So just you can go ahead and check that out in the show notes. There's some great local organizations that are, although not specific to the trans community, they are LGBTQ AI plus based. So that, that's groups like Alliance for Full Acceptance, AFFA for short. We Are Family is a great local organization. So they will have resources for you as well, I'm sure. And those are some great organizations for those who are not, trans themselves or parents of trans children. Those are great places, maybe if you're looking to donate or support, looking into that, because the folks in that community are definitely going to need the assistance of these organizations and have safe spaces and places where they can be accepted and not demonized. So that's all I'll talk about on that for now. I'm sure there'll be more in the future as we see the devastating effects that will happen when this does go into effect. Some more sad news, although in a different vein. The famed UFO Welcome Center in Bowman, South Carolina. I mean, just one of the craziest roadside attractions that I've ever seen, let alone in South Carolina. I mean, ever. I laugh because of just how unique it was, but unfortunately the news is not laughable, is that it has burned to the ground after a fire early on Thursday morning. Just a bummer to see that news on Thursday. The Times and Democrat of Orangeburg was one of the first entities to report on this. The fire brought the entire structure down. So crews from several area departments ended up arriving on the scene to try to control the blaze. Unfortunately, they were unable to do so. The photos I've seen, I mean, the structure is completely gone. So certainly some sad news for anyone who enjoyed seeing it, but in particular, Jody Pendarvis, who is the man who actually built the UFO Welcome Center. For those who don't know, he lives in like a trailer on the same property, and just next to it is where this UFO Welcome Center is that he built. It's been around for 20 plus years. I think he originally put up in like 1994. I have had pictures of it before on like my Instagram feed. You can scroll back and see it when I went to visit. I went there twice over the years. It's just a unique roadside attraction. If you happen to be in that area, you stop by. The Welcome Center was shaped like a traditional UFO we think of from movies and pop culture. And inside he had, like a couple different levels. There was like a TV in there. There was some chairs, just knickknacks. People would donate money when they would go. There was like a place where they could donate money, since he had built this whole thing himself. Um, and yes, judging by the name, you probably have ascertained that this was all, hey, if aliens were to arrive, this could be a place they could go to first and feel welcome. At least that's how Pendarvis explains why he built this roadside attraction. Um, so that's kind of the backstory of it. And even more devastating about this fire is that Pendarvis's trailer was also affected, according to the Post and Courier. Um, Pendarvis doesn't know what started the fire. He doesn't believe that there's any foul play or anything. And because of that, he's also not hopeful officials will really figure out what exactly started this fire. And it's a total loss, he told the Post and Courier. And that includes the trailer he lived in. So that's the real, obviously everyone's aware of the Welcome Center and all that. And may have fond feelings about that. But the fact that his home is also affected is certainly makes the story even sadder. And yes, I'm sure people listening are already wondering if there's any kind of like GoFundMe or something set up. I'll certainly share that in like my Twitter or Facebook, etc. Once and if something like that pops up. It seems Pendarvis has kept his humor, though, despite the circumstances. He said to the Post and Courier that maybe another UFO came by and started the fire. So, it seems he's still himself despite losing these two pieces of his property. So, like I said, I'll keep you posted if there's any GoFundMes or things like that. Certainly sad news that he's lost that trailer and the UFO Welcome Center. Obviously a loss for South Carolina as well. Just such a unique and fun, kooky kind of thing that we had here in the state. Brought joy of some level to people just knowing about it, going there. It's just a fun little silly thing. And we don't have a lot of those, it feels like sometimes. So definitely sad to see it go. And lastly, Charleston County probate judge Irv Condon must personally repay more than $11,000 after a recent audit found many unauthorized uses of county charge cards. Commonly known as P cards, the P stands for procurement. Many of you are probably well aware of that. I've had a P card in one of my jobs in the past. These are just easy ways for people who work for a business. These cards are usually under the business name / the cardholder's name, but really it's the business that, the credit and everything is on their side. And then they just have a designated person who's allowed to use that card. These are just for whatever the business may need. You quickly charge it. That way you don't have to worry about like an employee charging something and then you have to reimburse them and yada, yada, yada. So there's many people in Charleston County that have these cards. But there's been some audits that have been done, and it found that, which is no surprise when you have a lot of people with these cards. There's going to be unauthorized transactions, things that maybe shouldn't have gone through. These usually aren't a big deal. It's usually like, oh, I accidentally used this card for this small purchase. I'll reimburse the company or whatever. But there was found in this audit that there were a little bit bigger issues than that. And Charleston, the county council was actually debating what repayment figures, should apply to Condon. and it ranged from anywhere from about $4,000 upwards to $14,000. They ended up going with what was ultimately the second highest option, which is that 11,000 plus that I mentioned. The only card spending that the judge was not ordered to repay, so you just, as I mentioned, those different levels, like where are these different numbers coming from? Ultimately they decided there's some stuff that, no, this is actually okay, even if maybe like a proper protocol wasn't followed. They did decide that a purchase he had made of printers for staff that were working from home, which had not been authorized appropriately, they decided he didn't need to pay that back. So again, sometimes it's just a matter of proper protocols not followed. So it's not necessarily that anything shady was going on or what have you. And so they ultimately decide, like, no, that purchase is okay. We'll let that go. Now, Condon has defended the spending, although, he has said the buck stops with him. But he has said that everything that he's being asked to repay were budgeted items that benefited the county. But he did concede that proper procedures were not followed. So although, again, doesn't mean anything shady is going on. We're not talking necessarily like he bought himself something lavish for his home. These are things that ostensibly and according to him were things that were actually going to be used in the county for appropriate work. Uh, Regardless of his explanation, he'll be paying back, like I said, that 11,000 plus. Now, the spending that was ultimately flagged was more than 18% of the purchases made by Condon's office. So again, the percentage isn't that big either, but obviously 18% still significant, and $11,000 is certainly a lot of money to have to pay back for something. So again, it appears this controversy is over, especially once he pays it back. But I know it's been in the news and wanted to provide that update. So be careful with those P cards, everyone out there. Make sure you're following proper protocols. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. I haven't said this in a while, but if you're looking to help out the podcast, there's several ways you can do so. Of course, liking and subscribing to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on is a big help. If you leave a review, that's a really big help as well. Sharing it with friends and family who may be interested. All of these things I really appreciate. Also, any other social profiles I have, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, I have a TikTok, but I don't really put anything on it. But it would still help. You can follow that if you want. Any follows, likes, retweets, shares, all that stuff always helps. Same with sharing stories you see on the website and letting people know about it. Those are all things that can help out, and just takes a few moments to do so. If you want to go to that extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/Holy City Center and sign up for one of those support tiers. If you don't want to do any of those, can't do any of those, that's okay. Just thanks for listening, and all the way to this point in the episode where I'm sure people just tune it off at this point. So I appreciate you nonetheless. And I super appreciate two folks in particular, of course, Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem, because she produces each and every episode of this show and makes it sound perfect. Well, she can only do so much with my voice and, the silly things I say. But other than that, she does an amazing job. And a thank you goes to Tyler Boone as well, whose music you hear in each and every show. Have an awesome weekend. Stay safe out there during these storms, however long they go through. And, stay tuned for Monday's episode. Should be an interview. If it's not the interview I have planned, there's a few things in the works, but you don't need to know that. The point is, it will be a really good and interesting interview when it is able to be released. I'm planning on Monday. We'll see what happens. But regardless, there'll be something for you to listen to on Monday. And I look forward to having you all back at that time. Until then, good night and good luck.